Hi, I'm Greg Dell with Attorneys Dell and Schaefer, and I'm here with attorney Cesar Gavidia and Stephen Jessup, and we're going to talk about long-term disability insurance claims for surgeons. And Cesar and Steve, surgeons generally have individual disability policies. They may have a group disability policy if they're working for a hospital or one of these bigger medical groups, but for the most part, the surgeons buy their own policies. The group policies governed by ERISA aren't so great. We'll touch about them during this video, but let's talk about some tips for how to handle these claims for surgeons, the difference between an own occupation and any occupation, the difference between total and residual is going to be a huge aspect that we often deal with for surgeons, and then some of the other things from our personal experiences of having helped hundreds of surgeons at all stages of a claim. So Cesar, I think the first thing to get into is what is the most common definition of disability that we see in these disability policies for surgeons?
Well, fortunately for surgeons, they were part of a group of professionals and occupations that were really sought after by the insurance agents back when these policies were really prominent and were being sold a lot. And you should see some of these definitions of own occupation. I mean, they're basically the elite standard. I saw a policy recently for a neurosurgeon that the definition of disability was inability to perform the substantial material duties of your occupation, your regular occupation, and your regular occupation was defined specifically as a specialty. If your regular occupation is primarily a specialty, it's considered that specialty. So if 60% of his work is this specific type of surgery, and he could be doing something else 50% of the time, as long as he's not performing that specific type of surgery, he's potentially totally disabled. So that's a really elite, really great definition of disability. But most of the time what you find is these occupational specific definitions of disability with these specific occupational definitions as well.
And we're going to get into that in a few minutes about how you said he could be totally disabled because that's called the specialty definition of total. But Steve, we're also seeing, and those are some of the older policies, you still can get very good own occupation definitions of disability. But we're also seeing these other policies that are being written by these companies where it is an own occupation, which is commonly the duties of what you were doing, specifically what you were doing before you became disabled, but then it says, and not gainfully employed. Mm-hmm. So that kind of...
Well, those are the situations where generally people don't purchase upgraded riders to get a true own occupation. So if you are employed in some way, you're not going to collect a total disability. Generally, there'll be a residual disability rider in there, so you'll still get a percentage of it. So that's usually where people try to, maybe save themselves a little money when they're purchasing the language. And a lot of times agents, if they're discussing with you upgrading, especially the occupational definitions, that's some of the best money you could spend into the policy. And then also, to the effect of when they're not a strong own occupation, is like when Cesar's instance here, is when they say, your regular occupation is within the scope of your license, which is basically the practice of medicine in general.
Which is terrible.
Which is not really a true own occupation policy. So you see that as well.
You see that in the standard policies a lot. Now, let's get into when they say your occupation. Steve, what are the information that they're going to look at from a surgeon to prove what that surgeon's occupation was at the time that he or she became disabled?
Billing codes, what they're billing for to the insurance companies. And I have run into instances where doctors have a boutique practice and they don't take insurance. That's made it really difficult to establish what was done without, appointment books and ledgers, all that type of stuff. But I think the golden evidence would be what's in the actual billing codes, what they're billing insurance companies for the procedures done. Mm-hmm. And then you have to be careful sometimes because a lot of times, you have the workup billing to do the surgery, and insurance companies try to focus on, most of what you're doing in these consults, but that consult is only being done to determine if you're going to do the surgery. So that gets evaluated a lot, but your billing codes are going to be, the gold standard.
Yeah, and to touch on what Steve said, so yeah, it's almost systematic. They want to see these CPT codes, these billing codes, but for surgeons such as, for instance, plastic surgeons who don't go through insurance, who don't really have a requirement to produce billing codes because it's a kind of cash business, what do you do then? And that's complex. They can't, and the insurance companies are sometimes so confined in this box, looking for certain things, repeating and re-requesting the same things that really can't be produced, That's why I think when they do file a disability claim, particularly for these occupations that they may not do billing or produce CPT codes, they have to have a very good understanding of what each one of their procedures, occupational duties, and surgeries are.
We're doing this general surgeon video, but the nuances within the surgeon category is so different also, from the general surgeon who's in the hospital almost every day to the orthopedic surgeon who might only be doing surgeries on every Tuesday and Wednesday, to the OBGYN surgeons who are maybe delivering 10 babies a month and a couple other obstetric procedures. So the heart surgeon, you're not necessarily in the OR every day, but the practices that get somewhat complicated are the ones that you touched on, Steve, where maybe they're in the OR one time a week, and now they're saying you have an office. The ENTs of the world, surgeons, who may only be in once or twice a week, and then they say, but you have more codes in the office versus in the operating room. And where that segues into is the doctor now who says, look, I'm going to give up my surgery practice, and some surgeons can do that and now only have an office practice. Can that person still be totally disabled?
They can be, but it's going to be difficult because those codes, like Caesar said, they get very focused on them, and that's what they're going to look back to. And a lot of times they're going to say, well, this was a material and substantial duty of your job just by time you did it, so you're now only residually disabled. Now, depending on policy language, say you don't have a lifetime policy, right? So the residual disability impact won't be so bad, because a lot of these policies, if you're still experiencing a 75% loss of income, they'll pay you 100% of the benefits. So even though, and then also with that, surgeries may not make up the majority of the billing, but from a monetary standpoint, may bring in the lion's share for the practice too. So it's not only just time, but what brings home the money. You said ENTs, OBGYNs, you see that happen a lot as well. And we've had cases I've represented a cardiologist. Well, he did surgery. He worked in a group and all he did was their surgery. But then when he separated on his own, the vast majority of his billing was all just regular cardiological workup. And they're like, you're not a pure surgeon anymore in this. So it is really kind of a fine line of establishing what that'll be.
But I think what you also need to look at and analyze is the amount of incidental type of procedures and duties that are being done in the clinic, that are being done in the office, like Steve had said, because many of those types of procedures are completely eliminated, but for the surgery that surgeon's performing.
Right, because most of the surgeons say, look, as soon as, and this is the challenge that we understand very well, as soon as the word gets out that I'm not doing surgeries anymore,
it'll dry up.
The referrals are going to dry up. That's why everyone sends their patients to me, because I do the surgeries. And as soon as they know I'm not doing surgeries, I'm done. So, that's a very difficult process. And Caesar, you have tons of surgeons you've represented who are walking this tightrope of working through their medical condition, risking malpractice, but not reducing what they're doing at work. And then they get to the point in time where they say, I'm going to stop. And either you're helping them apply, or they've been denied already because there was no reduction in what they were doing, yet they stopped. Yeah. And so how do you help that doctor to prove that he couldn't continue doing what he'd been doing with the same diagnosis for months or years?
Yeah, we encounter that, quite a bit, because whether, they are, it's just maybe a psychological barrier where they don't want to back off. They need to keep pushing through. They have kids in college, any number of things. They're just pushing through this pain and these problems they're having, even at potentially the risk of a malpractice issue or an injury to a patient or an exacerbation to their medical condition. But I think in terms of trying to navigate that type of situation, you have to really focus in on the medical issues going on, whether there can be a justification for this abrupt stop. Either the risk to the patients is too high for them to continue, looking at perhaps the objective, some of the objective and subjective evidence in terms of the medical conditions and disability, the medical support from their doctors, establishing that, look, it's not safe for you to continue. You're either going to continue hurting yourself, you're going to make this problem much worse. taking a step back or stopping or reducing is going to alleviate some of these problems for you, that's the only solution to this, those are the things we need to look at.
Yeah, and a lot of doctors, surgeons I haven't met a surgeon that isn't a type A personality. Go, 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 go. I mean,
They didn't get there without
Yeah, exactly. They don't want to give it up, and there's that sense of pride that they're not, they can work through, they don't want to give up, everything they worked for, the years of school, running their own practices and stuff like that. So it can be a lot of times very difficult for them to want to pull back. And it may take, something happening in an OR where it makes us a wake-up call, like, oh my God, I maybe really need to consider what I do from here, kind of thing.
We've had a client, and I know that the name's going to come to your mind when I say it, but you recall we've had surgeons that have had to step back from the operating table because they were in too much back pain.
Right.
They had to take a step back with a patient under general anesthesia right there.
Right. But
Or have their nurse or their OR nurse finish up and suture up the patient.
Doctors, a couple things. They went into medicine, they want to help people. Yes, doctors do well professionally, but medicine is not like it used to be in terms of financially. But these doctors still continue to want to help people and they want to work, and they're never making as much money on disability. Then they get to the point where they're basically like, I feel like I'm putting the patient at risk, possibly myself, but more so the risk of the patient. I need to stop. And when surgeons first call us, either they're applying or they've been denied, they're like, how can this company tell me, when I'm the one who's there over this person with their life in front of me, I'm controlling what can happen to them, life or death basically, that I should go back in there and do that? And what's this company going to do when something happens? Because they're not going to back me up, if I can't do this. But Steve, what tools is a disability company going to use to say, yeah, you can go back into we don't see a problem that you can't keep doing surgery?
They're going to get their own medical people, whether they're in-house initially or outside doctors, independent medical evaluations. And you would think sometimes there'd be a professional courtesy amongst doctors. But you see in denials, I was reviewing a denial for a client of ours who's a doctor, and when I pulled out the claim file reviews, it reminded me of more of a group disability, the way they looked at it. It was just blinders on, there's absolutely nothing wrong for this man we've paid for the past 12 years, that he can go back to practicing medicine today, there's nothing wrong. So they're going to get these outside sources that, or in this case, especially with Unum, in-house sources that just, they seem to almost ignore. Like they're looking more for reasons as to why you might be trying to pull something over them or what your abilities are. And the worst part is, especially if they don't do independent medical evaluations, don't put eyes on you, don't have you physically examined. But a lot of times these insurance companies, you're right, that's a great question. Who are they? There's really no answer to that. That's a great question, but one thing's for sure, when the money's on the line that they're looking to pay, they're going to fight tooth and nail to see how willing you are. Because if you're that doctor that tried to push through, and you get enough pushback from your insurance company, maybe you think, this isn't worth it. Maybe I just try to continue to work.
Caesar, we've litigated, hundreds of claims against the biggest companies, specifically for many, many surgeons. What is it in the litigation standpoint? I often tell the surgeons, look, they're not fighting your medical. It's very rare that it's going to be this battle of their doctor versus your doctor. So what is it when it comes down to, when we really start to litigate this, that the insurance companies are relying upon to say that the conditions you're saying limit you really don't, and here's why?
Everything but your disability. It could be anything from a licensing issue to perhaps your business was hitting a rough patch a couple of years ago, but maybe it picked back up, some inconsistencies in revenue and income. Again, a hyper focus on some of these incidental or non-relevant, I shouldn't say relevant, but not as significant certainly as your surgical procedures. This hyper focus on those things, as opposed to the true things that create your bread and butter for you.
Or heck, if they do surveillance or they do searches on the internet, we're representing a doctor. That was the basis of the denial. We saw that you've been traveling and you wrote a blog about it. Well, if you can travel, you should be back in the hospital, kind of thing. So they'll take those things to kind of undermine, credibility, attack the character. They're looking at a way to, show this person can't be, trusted in a way.
Well, I think Caesar, it's all about character, and when you get into the litigation, they dive into everything. Credit card bills, licensing, like you said, who are all of your past coworkers. And I mean, they're looking for things to see, what are you doing with your life, your social media, your Facebook, your Instagram, if you have all of those things.
I just had a field interview with a disability insurer, and as we're finishing up, she asked the doctor, who'd already sold his practice off to another doctor, "Oh, is your former office manager still working there? Is it okay if we could reach out to her and talk to her?" And that's when I interjected and I said, "If you need anything from them, I don't want you interrupting the business of this new doctor or talking to this staff or talking to anybody over there. We'll reach out to them. We'll get anything that you need. We'll get it for you."
Right. I had a doctor for years that had limitations, stopped doing particular procedures, and the disability carrier was like, "Well, we want to call the hospital." And he still had privileges, and he was allowed to, and he disclosed on his form that he has a limitation that limits certain things he can do. But he's like, "I don't want you talking to the hospital. And where does the policy say that I need to allow you to call the hospital to start talking about my medical issues? Because as soon as you start talking to them, it could jeopardize my entire practice. And I'm okay doing these other things. I just can't do the things that I told you about." Or, I have another client who was an anesthesiologist and is getting retrained in pain management now, and he has an own occupation policy. So he's going to go from, I can't do OR anesthesiology, but I'm going to go to be a pain management doctor where I can do procedures in the office. I don't have to be stuck in the OR, totally different situation. We want to talk to the residency program. We want to talk to your new employer. Well, he didn't have to disclose.
Yeah.
The reason he's going into pain management is because of the fact that he thinks he can do that. He couldn't do OR. Now the company wants to start talking to the residency or to his new employer, when if he thought that those things would affect what was going on, he would have told them. So, I say no, and then the disability companies sometimes say, "Well, you're interfering with our ability to investigate the claim." And that's where, as lawyers, we come in and advise the claimants as to what they have to give up or don't have to give up. So it's a very tight line. And then, Caesar, the policies for the claimants who want to change occupations, doctors who say, "Well, I think I want to teach." What do they need to know in order to be able to say, can I stop doing surgery and can I be a general doctor? Can I teach? Can I retrain and still get my full disability?
Some policies certainly will allow it, but I think when we opened the video, we were talking about some policies that provide this "you cannot be gainfully employed" language in the definition of disability and of occupation. So, it's going to take a very commanding understanding of your policy, of the provisions, in order to be able to make this really important decision that could completely alter the course of your disability claim.
Right, and I think the hotbed issue that we deal with the surgeons who don't want to stop working is, are you total or are you residual? And the residual is, are you able to do one or more of your important duties? And the question comes down to, what are the important duties? And that is sometimes the multi-million-dollar question in these claims, that there's case law all over the place, that it's very, very fact-specific, and that's an issue that we would clearly analyze and try to plan out for a disability claimant based upon the policy. And for people who are buying policies, they should consider what that is. And that's the big issue with Northwestern Mutual, what they call their medical occupation disability, versus the other carriers say, no, we're better because we are truly own occupation. So,
well, I like that they're competitive with that language, because the lack of competition out there amongst disability insurance companies and policies just means that they're going to provide more restrictive language if they could get away with it.
Right. So the starting point for someone who's watching this video and dealing with these issues of whether you're total or residual or even have a chance to get paid on your claim is to call any of us at the law firm. We're going to initially review your disability policy for free. If you've been denied, we're going to review your denial letter. Often people contact us when they're starting to get a feeling that they're going to get denied and they're getting the runaround, and still we want to review the policy, discuss your practice with you, and in an initial call, we can right away let you know how we can assist you. We are available to represent you all over the country, and we encourage you to check out our other YouTube videos and even subscribe to our channel, where we discuss all about applying, appeals, medical issues, and tons of tips that can help you with your claim. We hope that you'll contact us in the future.